This week on Art on the Air, our entire show features former Chicago Tribune photographer who collaborated with Rick Kogan on his column Sidewalks about interesting people and places in the greater Chicago area, Charles Osgood, who continues his career as a freelancer. Our spotlight is on the Duneland Photography Club with its president Steve Bensing about their January 15th exhibit opening at Art Barn.
Express yourself through art and show the world your heart. Express yourself through art and show the world your heart. You're in the know with Esther and Larry. Art on the air today. Stay in the know with Larry and Esther. Art on the air our way. Express yourself through art and show the world your heart. Express yourself through art and show the world your heart.
Welcome. You're listening to Art on the Air on WVLP 103.1 FM and Lakeshore Public Radio 89.1 FM, our weekly program covering arts and arts events throughout Northwest Indiana and beyond. I'm Larry Breckner of New Perspectives Photography, right alongside here with Esther Golden of The Nest in Michigan City.
Aloha, everyone.
We're your hosts for Art on the Air. Art on the Air is supported by an Indiana Arts Commission Arts Project grant through South Shore Arts and the National Endowment for the Arts. Art on the Air streams live at WVLP.org and is rebroadcast on Monday at 5 p.m., plus is also heard on Lakeshore Public Radio 89.1 FM every Sunday at 7 p.m., also streaming live at lakeshorepublicradio.org, and is available on Lakeshore Public Radio's website as a podcast. Our spotlight interviews are also heard Wednesdays on Lakeshore Public Radio. Information about Art on the Air is available at our website, breck.com/AOTA. That's Breck, BRECH.com/AOTA. That includes a complete show archive, spotlight interviews, plus our show is available on multiple podcast platforms, including NPR One. Please like us on Facebook, Art on the Air, WVLP, for information about upcoming shows and interviews. And we'd like to welcome to Art on the Air Spotlight, or actually welcome back, Steve Bensing, who's president of the Duneland Photography Club. And they meet regularly in Porter County here at the
Sunset Hill Farm County Park.
Right. And that's what days do you meet?
Our regular meeting is the first Tuesday of the month, and we usually meet at 7 p.m.
Okay. And I know you used to have a thing where people would come earlier for like some mentoring also.
Yes. Sometimes we'll have an early 5:30 mentoring session. So we're still doing that most of the time.
Excellent. So tell us a little bit about what you're doing now with the club, what you have been doing in terms of exhibits. I think you just had an exhibit close, and what you got coming up and other activities maybe into 2022.
Okay. Well, the Duneland Photography Club, we've decided that we want to keep people engaged as much as possible. So in the days when we were really cautious about what was going on, we were meeting by Zoom, but now, and we've had some meetings outdoors. Now we're meeting at our regular places again, but we still have a lot of outdoor things, and we still use the internet for some of our activities. So we're using pretty much any modality we have to keep people engaged and informed. So we give you an example of some of the things we've been doing. We do some community service. For example, the Memorial Opera House in Valparaiso, we do some photography for them. And so that they've started up their productions, and we're doing photos of the headshots of the artists, and we're also having one of our members is doing some of the live shots of the dress rehearsals, so they have some action shots as well. So we're doing that kind of thing. We've been members have been involved in different exhibits that have been going on, and this exhibit that we have coming up in the beginning of the year will be one of the first times that we've gotten together as having a club exhibit. The last time we did that as a group was, I believe it was earlier this year at the Chesterton Arts Center, somewhere around February and March. So
Steve, how big is the membership, and is there a fee to belong to it?
Yes. Okay. So our membership is growing. We have over 100 paid members right now. Of course, they're not all showing up at the exact same time, but it's been amazing. Even in times of pandemic times and so on, we've had a lot of people that have been interested. They've seen us out on outings on hikes in the dunes or different places, and they've been interested and wanted to join up with us. So it seems like every month we have more people joining, and it's really pretty reasonable to join the club. It's only $10 a year for an individual member, and if you want to sign up as a family, it's $20. So we're getting membership for the new year right now. But anyway, we've been growing, and we're just happy that we can be here for people that are interested in photography.
Do you have any field trips planned?
Yes, as a matter of fact, now there's some that we're doing in the month of December, which by the time this aired will be over with. But we, just to give you an example of things that we do, we've done some hikes in the dunes. We've done. We're going to be going to Lincoln Park Zoo and do some photos of the zoo lights. Also, locally, go to Peteyville and take some pictures of the Christmas lights there. In the wintertime, we like to get some hikes, even in the snow. So we've done some of that, and we'll be having some of those things coming up early in the year. Sometimes it's nice to go to some of the events that are local, such as in downtown Valparaiso. It's pretty, especially when we get a little bit of snow. We'll be looking to get out and get some pictures of that. At our upcoming meetings, we have a variety of things planned for this coming year. In January, one of our members, Dave Liseco, is going to do a presentation on film photography and developing your own film. And he's a unique individual, and we love his interest and his technical ability in doing some of those, some people might consider old school photography, but we learn a lot from that. In February, we're actually going to have a Zoom meeting, but Barry Butler, who's a well-known photographer in Chicago, has agreed to do a presentation for us via Zoom. So we're going to be doing that in February. And then in March, we have scheduled Leela Hewlett, who's the superintendent of the photography for 4-H, and we're going to have her do a presentation on how to teach your kids photography. So you can see there's quite a variety of things that we're planning on coming up.
A beautiful variety.
We've got a little over a minute left, and we want to make sure we hit about the upcoming exhibit you have at the Art Barn. So tell us some of the details about that.
Okay, the Art Barn exhibit, it will be our exhibit, the Duneland Photography Club. We're setting it up on the January the 8th. We'll have an opening reception on the 15th, and it runs through the 12th of February. Along with us, there's a artist in residence at the Art Barn right now, and she will be there as well, Samantha Purse, and she will be part of our reception as well. So we'll be kind of sharing that a little bit with that. We think that's a fun thing to do as well. So it will be members of the club, essentially, as far as the photography is concerned. And we're putting that together right now.
Very good. So it's the Duneland Photography Club at the Art Barn, which is at 695 North 400 East in Valparaiso. It's running January 8th through February 12th, and the opening reception is January 15th. Steve Bensing, thank you so much for coming on Art on the Air Spotlight.
Thank you, Steve.
Okay, thanks.
You're listening to Art on the Air, WVLP 103.1 FM, and on Lakeshore Public Radio 89.1 FM. You're listening to Art on the Air, WVLP 103.1 FM, and on Lakeshore Public Radio 89.1 FM. And we'd like to welcome to Art on the Air. He was a Chicago Tribune photographer during his career, now is a freelancer specializing in theater, performance, events, including sometimes weddings, travel, and fashion. For 13 years, he collaborated with Rick Kogan on his column Sidewalks about interesting people and places in the greater Chicago area, and all the books that are associated with that called the SidewalksBookCompany.com. Please welcome to Art on the Air, Chuck Osgood. Welcome to Art on the Air.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to
Welcome.
be here.
It's so
What can
great
I
to
tell
see you,
you?
Chuck.
Well, we usually like to start out an interview with kind of like you telling us your personal story, like how you got from where you were to where you are now. So tell us a little bit about your background, Chuck.
Okay, so I did things a little bit backwards, but anyway, I went the normal thing through high school and college, but and then the Army at that time. You were almost forced to go in the Army, so I went through ROTC. Went over to Korea for a couple of years, came back, I had no idea what I was going to do. And so I figured, well, I love travel. I'll go to work for American Airlines in their management training program. Did that. And I got washed out after a year and a half. So I thought, well, what's next? And the only thing I could think of that would make me happy was photography. So I thought I'd pursue that. I got a job at Altman's Camera, if anybody remembers that, in
I
Chicago
do.
Loop.
Yeah, sure
And I was there for 2 weeks when another job offer came through to me, and that was with the City News Bureau, which is that old venerable organization that trained reporters, photographers, not photographers, reporters, how to be reporters. So I learned everything I learned about journalism at City News. I was there for 7 months, moved over to the Tribune, started there as a reporter and writer. And I had no training for this, really. I was at City News for 7 months. The first day I was at City News, I said, how many photographers are here? And the guy looked at me and said, we don't have any photographers. What are you talking about? So I said, what am I? Am I a reporter? He said, yeah, you're a reporter. I said, great. I don't know anything about it. So anyway, I went to the Tribune as a reporter and writer. I had actually 2 weeks of training writing at City News. And then I was a journalist. Now, you had a lot of trouble getting photographers at that time to take pictures for your stories. So I took my own pictures. They said, yeah, it's fine. We'll use your pictures, but you can't use our darkroom. So I take my film home, process the film in my bathroom, make prints, bring them in, and prints with my story. At one point, my boss called me to the office and he said, I think you're going to have a hard time being a reporter, but there's an opening in the photo department. So I jumped over to photo and there I was. That was the beginning. 39 years later, I left.
So, was it City News that you had like the midnight beat, or was it the Trib?
Well, both actually. I had the night beat at City News for starters, and there was a guy there named Arnold Dornfeld, and everybody called him Dorney. And he was a real scary guy. He was big and he was mean looking, and he gave you a lot of grief if you didn't do things right. So he's famous for the expression, if your mother says she loves you, check it out. Because every
good
time
advice.
you did a story, you had to check
That's
and
good
double check
advice.
and triple check. In fact, I think that was the title of his memoirs.
So was it like a typical, so what are the nights like?
Well, the nights are more hard news and fires and things like that. Day shift, you do some news, some hard news. In fact, my first assignment was I worked out of one of the local police stations, which is a really nice way to go because you get to know the cops there, they get to know you, they feed you stories. And these are stories that would never come to light if you didn't have that connection. That's long, long gone.
That cooperation, you mean?
Yeah, cooperation, right.
Well, tell us about that Rick Kogan Sidewalks project you work on for many, many years. Maybe jumping ahead a little bit on your timeline, but I'm curious about that.
Oh,
Yeah,
I just love that series so much. It was like the highlight every Sunday.
It was my highlight, too. It was the best job I could even think of in journalism. because first of all, you're with Kogan, and Kogan's fantastic, and he's funny, and he's a really sharp reporter. So he'd come up with these story ideas, or actually how it started was the two of us just jumped in a car and went out and looked for stories. And that was how the whole column started. Later on, he switched over and came up with his own story ideas for the most part. But even so, it sort of got that feel of discovery.
So how did you two did you meet at the Trib? Did you meet before the Trib? How did your friendship come about?
Yeah, we met with he was a freelancer for the Trib, and he had to do a story on Coco Taylor, the blues, the queen of the blues.
The queen,
and
yes.
I was assigned to Coco, and we spent 2 or 3 days with Coco in and out at nights watching her concert. But we started out going to her home and knocked on the door, and she came in her bathrobe with her hair up, and she said, "Yes, can I help you?" We said, "Well, we have an appointment with you this morning now." And she said, "Oh, I thought that was tomorrow." "Oh, okay, come on in." So we hung out with Coco and her husband Pops and their dog, little yappy dog. So that started out. Then he came up. He was assigned to the magazine years later. It was 1987 that we did Coco Taylor, and it was 1998 when he was working on the magazine, and he was taking over a column that he didn't like. So he decided to come up with a new angle for the column, and that was Sidewalks. And then he called me. He said, "You want to do this?" And I said, "Are you kidding me?" "Yeah." So we did it together for 13 years before the Tribune pulled the plug on me, because the last 3 years I was freelancing, and they didn't like paying for a freelancer when they had their own staff that could do it free.
That's understandable. Well, tell us some of the other adventures. You've done a lot of theater and concerts and things like that. And also some of the things you did, like you hitchhiked to Seattle for the World's Fair. And tell us a little about that, and maybe even where you went to college.
Well, okay. So I went to Ripon College, Ripon, Wisconsin. I was buddies with Al Jarreau, who's the famous jazz singer now, but he was in a group called the Indigos at Ripon. Ripon, by the way, only has about 850 students. So he and the Indigos would rehearse in the student commons, and I'd go in there and hang out with them. I like to consider myself the fifth Indigo, but I'm not sure anybody else would. And then, so he graduated in 1962. I was supposed to graduate in 1963, but my grades were horrible. And so I hitchhiked out to the Seattle World's Fair and worked out there selling popcorn and caramel corn and some god-awful grape and raspberry drinks of some sort, and had a blast. And then went down to San Francisco and hung out there for a while, worked in the department store for Christmas in the kids section. And then came back and went back to school, which meant I was in the same class as Harry Ford. Harry Ford, as you may know him better as Harrison Ford. So we had some well-known performers of sorts in our small school. There I went in, I took ROTC because my grades were so bad and it was an easy A. So, and I figured they were going to call me up in the Army as soon as I graduated anyway. So I was a lieutenant in Korea for almost 2 years. Then after that, you could get separated in Korea if you wanted to, and you had a year. They would pay for your flight back for a whole year. So I left the Army in Korea and took a boat to Japan, and then another boat to to Hong Kong, which was gorgeous. I was the only passenger on this Norwegian freighter to Hong Kong.
My.
And we arrived it was about 3 days, and we passed right by China, which back in 1966 was a real scary place to go. So we got to Hong Kong as the sun rose, and it was really gorgeous.
Did you have your camera with you?
I had a half frame camera. Good question. So I wanted to travel light, and I don't know if you know what a half frame is, but it takes twice as many pictures on a roll of film. So you only shoot a half a frame every time you click the shutter. And so I got 72 pictures out of a roll of film. And yes, do I have the pictures from the boat? I don't think so, but I have some pictures in half frame from that time.
How long did you travel? You said you had up to a year to take that return flight?
4 months. So my first entry into hard news maybe was in Macau. So I was in Hong Kong, Macau. I wanted to go to Macau, but suddenly there were a whole lot of riots there. They closed down the city and you couldn't get to the island of Macau, which was run by the Portuguese at that time. So the first day that Macau opened back up, I hopped in a ferry and went over to Macau and kind of snuck pictures of broken statues and things like that. And that was it. And then after Macau, I got all the way down to Singapore and stayed with a buddy that I'd met in Thailand, in Bangkok, just a few weeks before. He was with the what do you call when the people that go to foreign countries and work for a couple of years?
Like an expat?
What's that?
Like an expat or something?
No, it's a government thing.
Oh, a government thing.
Like a diplomat.
Oh, wouldn't that be nice? Yeah, they are sort of like diplomats. Right. But they're anyway, I hung out with him for about a month and then came back to the States. Ended up in San Francisco. That's as far as the Army would take me. I had to fly back on my own to Milwaukee at that time. And stayed at home in Milwaukee for a few months looking for a job in Chicago because I wanted to get out of Milwaukee, and got a job with American Airlines.
And what did you do with that?
Well, I was in a management training course, and so I did all sorts of things that management has to deal with. And after a year and a half, they realized I wasn't management material, something I knew long before that. But I was able to fool them for a year and a half. And but then I was out of a job. I could have stayed on as a ticket agent, but I decided to go off because I said, what am I going to do? And I've been planning this. What am I going to do? I would really like to get into photography, something that I had done ever since I got my first camera at age 7. And I was a photographer for the school newspapers and the school the yearbooks. So I loved it.
Did you do any training for photography, or like a lot of people, did you just pick it up pretty much?
I just picked it up until I got to the Tribune, and then I decided to take my first course at IIT. And so I was a reporter, took pictures for my columns, for my stories at the Tribune, and then started taking photo courses. And after only 2 months in the photo course, they moved me over to the photo department. But I ended up getting an MFA there in 1976 and never used the MFA as such.
Well, I don't know. You teach.
What's that?
You also teach. So you've.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, I did. I did use it because I taught at Columbia.
Yeah.
About once or sometimes twice a year for about 20 years.
So Chuck, can you talk about some of the places that you got to go to because of the Trib, and one that I'll mention.
Because of the what? I'm sorry.
Because of the Trib stories that you were covering for the Tribune, because I know we've spoken about this before, because I love dance so much, and those images that you have of Baryshnikov rehearsing are just so intimate and wonderful, and I really felt like I was there. So I know that's one Trib assignment. And I also know in the 70s, was it the Trib that you went to see the Sly Stone concert?
Yeah. Okay. So the Sly Stone non-concert was in 1970, and he was going to be at Grant Park. And he had this reputation for not showing or showing up incredibly late, sometimes as much as 7 or 8 hours late. So the place was packed. There was an opening act on stage. I was on stage taking pictures of the opening act and the audience. And after about 45 minutes, somebody in the back of the audience threw a bottle on stage. And then somebody else threw a bottle. And then somebody threw a can. And then suddenly it started raining down stuff, objects, rocks, anything that someone could throw. And I got off the stage as quickly as I could. The band that was playing got off the stage. Some of their instruments were damaged. And
did you get any shots from behind the speakers?
From behind the...
No, just I'm like to dodge all the stuff coming on stage. Did you document that?
Well, it's kind of hard to get, one or a bottle in air.
True,
I'm not
but
sure.
debris
Maybe
on the
some of my
stage.
shots have some of those in it. But if they were in the shot, then the bottle would be so small, you probably couldn't see it, not see it well.
Well, actually, the one that you also got to fly to LA with Led Zeppelin.
That was my favorite story of my career. Actually, I had that early. Yeah, so Led Zeppelin was coming to town, and they're known for going out and seeing various parts of the city, blues bars, things like that. So I got in touch with their PR guy about 6 or 8 weeks before they came, and we're talking back and forth for quite a long time. And yes, I was going to be able to do this. Yes, no problem. And he calls me on their opening night in Chicago. They had, I think, 3 or 4 sold out concerts. He called me up and he said, well, we're canceling tonight's concert because Robert Plant has laryngitis, but we're taking their private plane to LA. Would you like to come along? I thought about it for about a split second. I said, absolutely, I'll come. I didn't know if the Tribune would allow me to go, but I just said I'd go. And then I checked with the Tribune and they said, oh yeah, absolutely. So we got on I got picked up by a limousine at 5:00 that same day. And in the limousine was Jimmy Page and John Paul Jones in the back seat with their arms around a couple of young ladies. And I stayed in the front seat, and I turned around, and I took pictures of them. We got out to O'Hare in 20 minutes during rush hour. I still can't figure that one out. And got on their plane, their private jet called Starship. And I was read the rules, and that was I could photograph anything I wanted until they said stop. And when they said stop, I had to put my cameras away, and then I could party with them or do whatever I wanted. Yeah. Well, this plane was unlike any plane I've ever seen before or since. It was designed with rotating chairs in the main passenger part. There was couches along the sides and the back, and various other chairs just kind of cast around in various situations. Then behind that was a bar, and John Paul Jones acted as the bartender. And then behind that, there was a bedroom with a queen-size bed in it. And I think that was it. There might have been a shower. There's probably a shower back there, too. I don't know. I didn't see that. But
did you cover a concert in LA?
No, they just wanted to go party.
Oh,
This is a party group. They had their own plane. They had time on their hands. They loved LA, so they were going to go out there and party. And so after we landed in LA, we took separate vehicles into a hotel where they were staying. And I didn't see him for 3 or 4 days. So I just kind of hung out in LA waiting. And then I was told the flight's going back in 2 hours. I got a ride out to the plane when we came back. The neat thing about the flight back was that it was totally quiet. The flight out there was party central. It was crazy. They were smoking dope. They were drinking. You could go to the bar. You could order any kind of drink you wanted. John Paul Jones would pour it for you. And then he would play an electric piano behind the bar when he wasn't pouring drinks. And it was just great fun. Bonzo wandered around in a bathrobe and flashed the waitresses, which are not the stewardesses, which pissed them off. And then that was it. It was just party central.
So then you went from party.
Those are the best pictures, and I couldn't take them. The flight back was just the opposite. Completely quiet. Everybody's just kind of walking around in a daze. I walked up to Jimmy Page and I asked him for an interview, and he said, "Well, I didn't think there were supposed to be interviews on this flight." I said, "There aren't." I said, "I just wonder if I could talk to you." And he said, "Why not?" So I had a personal interview with Jimmy Page for 10 minutes. Very nice. Landed, Robert Plant wasn't on the flight. So when we landed, he hopped on the airplane and welcomed them back.
You're listening to Art on the Air with Chuck Osgood on WVLP 103.1 FM and on Lakeshore Public Radio 89.1 FM. So you also have done some traveling that maybe in more serious coverage of things like, I guess, in Europe, like Luxembourg, France, England, Northern Ireland. And so tell us a little about that journey there.
Actually, it's partly to do with covering hard news, like the Sly Stone concert, which really freaked me out. I wanted to just take a leave of absence, and they gave it to me. So I took 1 month vacation and 3 months leave of absence. Flew to, when I was 25, a week away from my 30th birthday, I flew on Icelandic for a student rate. So it was $167 round trip. Flew to Luxembourg, then got in a hippie mobile to Paris, then went to see an uncle in England and bought a car for $200. Drove to the coast. I wasn't even going to go to Ireland because I wanted to stay away from the troubles in Northern Ireland.
Right.
So I said, well, I can go to Ireland. That's no problem. So I took the ferry over to Ireland and drove all around Ireland, found myself at the Northern Ireland border. And I thought, well, nothing ever happens to foreign journalists, or even journalists in general. I think I'll go there for a day or two and figure out what's going on and then get the hell out. Well, it took me 7 weeks before I could figure out what was going on. I hung out with a student newspaper called Gown at the university in Belfast, got to know a lot of people there. One of them is Conor O'Clery, who went on to become the foreign correspondent for the Irish Times for 30 years, and I'm still buddies with him. I ended up 7 weeks in Belfast that I was going to completely avoid, and then got out of there. But then after that, I've also covered, I went to
The Nobels.
Russia, to the Soviet Union to do an economic story in 86. So before that, I went to the Nobel Awards
Right.
in 1976. That was very cool.
I bet 2 Chicagoans that year.
Yeah. And then to China. So after the Soviet Union, went to China for, I was over there a total of about 3 weeks. A couple of weeks in China with the governor, went to Shenyang, which was our sister city, our new sister city at the time, the Chicago's. And
you went with Governor Thompson then, didn't you?
Yeah, Governor Jim Thompson and about 50 Chicago businessmen that were trying to make contacts over there. This was 1986, and we're still pretty new to China.
And that was a time that in China, it was kind of different than, of course, the China that we know today, which is, completely different, very industrial. That was pretty, in the 80s, that was still kind of almost a backwater.
It really was. There was nobody just driving cars. There were thousands of bicycles clogging the streets. And I thought, well, they'll never have cars over here because there's no room for them. But I was proven wrong. But what was cool is that they had not seen Americans. They hadn't seen anybody other than Chinese for the most part. And I would go around and take pictures on Polaroids, and then I would hand them the picture. And that they were just in awe that they had this picture of themselves that they'd never actually seen before. So that happened quite a bit. That was actually my second time in China. My then wife, Carol, and our new baby, Via, went over there. Well, we took 4 months over in Asia, and we went to Hong Kong, and not knowing that we could even get into China, and you could go to China for a day. You get on a bus and you drive over the border and you'd go in there. And so we did the same thing. Now with Via, it was very special because the Chinese, any baby is everybody's baby. And so they were in awe to see her blonde hair and her blue eyes. And at one point, we had eaten lunch with the others in the bus load, and we were walking back to the bus, and we decided to go a slightly different way, and we walked a different path, not with the others. And we found ourselves completely surrounded by about 30 Chinese who were just oohing and eyeing and pointing at Via. And then one of them reaches out his hands, and so I lifted her up, and he reached out his hands for me to give Via to him, and I did, and he just held her up in the air, and he's smiling and laughing, and then he passed her all around. She got the full treatment, and then we got back. We said we had to go with a bus or something, with sign language. And so Via came back to us, and we got on the bus and left. And a lot of people say, "Oh, are you crazy? I mean, weren't you worried at all that you wouldn't see her again?" And I said, "Didn't occur to me till you asked the question." There's such a family-oriented country.
I know. I was going to say it's done in love, like Italy. When I had the children in Italy, everybody wanted to hug them, and you just become part of a bigger family.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Did you take any photographs, and were you afraid in that time of any government intervention of taking a photo of the wrong thing?
No. When I went with the governor, we had sort of a minder with us, so not all the time. I think there might have been 1 or 2 times where I snuck a picture, but I wasn't really too worried about that. I figured if anybody didn't want me to do it, they'd tell me. But in the Soviet Union.
Yeah, I was going to say also probably the couple times you went to Bosnia too, that must have been pretty strict rules as well.
No, there's no rules in Bosnia. It's just how much you want to risk your life. That's the only rule. Your own rule. I mean, you just have to use common sense. And no, that wasn't a problem. There was one time when I decided not to go into an area because I wasn't sure what it was going to be like. But I was in some very sketchy areas in Bosnia. The first time I went, the first time I was in Yugoslavia was 1978 when my wife was in a dance company, and they were there for 3 weeks or for 6 weeks, and I went over for 3 of them, and then took a lot of pictures. And when I came back, the Tribune liked them so much they sent me back to take more pictures. with a foreign correspondent. So that worked out really well. In 80, when I went back in 96, I was working with a Yugoslavia or Bosnian group here in Chicago. And I said, I was wondering if after the Dayton Peace Accords, if anybody that was here would want to go back. I was thinking, why the hell would anyone want to go back to Bosnia? And I found a couple that had been medevaced here. The man was injured by mortars and was brought here for health care. And so he and his wife really wanted to go back. They had a house there. Their family was there, and they really wanted to go home. They spoke 5 words of English, and I spoke about that many in Serbo-Croatian. So we took a plane together. We landed in Croatia. Then the problem was, how do we get into Bosnia? Because even though the war was technically over, there was still a lot of hatred going on, and it wasn't safe to be in some parts of Bosnia, especially with Bosnians. So I could fly in on a UN flight and get to Bosnia, but that would leave them to find their own way in. Then the other thing was we could take a bus in, or I could rent a car. But if I rented a car, I couldn't get insurance because it will insure you for going into a war zone.
So then the following year, you went to cover Pope John Paul II. So
yeah.
How was...
Well, I think this is a really amazing story, though. I'm going to tell you, getting into Bosnia, I decided to rent the car. $15,000, the Tribune can handle it if it's stolen. And we drove down the coast of former Yugoslavia, and then got to the border of Croatia. We had to go through Croatia first, and we were stopped at the border and separated. And then after 10 minutes, and I didn't know if it was going to be 10 minutes or 10 hours, what would happen, we got in and we started driving. Now, I had planned this whole thing so we'd drive during the daytime, which would be safer. When we didn't get to Croatia until sundown. So we're driving through Croatia at night, total night. And then we get into Bosnia and it's black, it's pitch black, and there's no other cars on the highway. There's mines lining the highway. So every time we had to stop and do what comes naturally, we'd have to do it in the middle of the road. So we stop, get out of the car, go behind the car, go take a leak, and then come back in, hop back in the car. And then we'd go through, the road was completely potholed. Chicago has not seen potholes like this. We had a pothole. There was a hubcap that came off. I stopped the car to pick up the hubcap, got back in, drove in, finally got to Sarajevo. And it was the eeriest situation I've ever been in. There were no lights in Sarajevo. Once in a while, you'd see a single light bulb. You could see skyscrapers that had been bombed out. So there were no windows in the skyscrapers, completely empty. And we're driving along, and all of a sudden they start screaming, left, in Serbo-Croatian. And I look left and I see only a dark black alley. And I thought, oh my God, they want me to go down this alley? I said, I got this far and this is where it ends. So I turned left. We went down the alley and it's completely black on every side. And halfway down the alley, there's lights. And I'm wondering, what the hell is that? And we keep going. And then they start screaming at me to stop. So I stopped the car. As soon as I stopped the car, the doors open. This is their house. And their whole family is in the house waiting for us. And we were 6 hours late. And they were freaked out because they thought something bad had happened. So we got there and, it was a joyful party into the wee hours. So that's, the one thing, this is one time when I didn't think we were going to make it. We're coming over a hill in pitch blackness, and we're going down the other side of the hill, and there's a creek at the bottom of the hill, but the bridge has been blown out. There was a replacement bridge, which is just metal ramps going up flat over the creek and then down on the other side. So I just apply the brakes, black ice. We are skidding down, and I have no control. I can sort of barely steer the car, but I couldn't slow the car at all. We're going faster and faster. I aim for that bridge. We hit it. We go flying through the air and land on the other side of the creek.
Wow.
Chuck Osgood, stunt person.
You're listening to Art on the Air with Chuck Osgood on WVLP 103.1 FM and on Lakeshore Public Radio 89.1 FM.
So like when you're covering the Pope as a journalist or photographer, how close do you get? Do you get to, do they make accommodations for the photographers, or do you just have to muscle your way in?
Well, there's there's various situations you get to photograph them. I think he was there for 2 or 3 days, and so we got to cover him all those days. One time he was speaking inside, and we could go one at a time to a place where we could see him and we could get close, so that all the photographers that were there's probably about 20 or 30 photographers from around the world that were photographing him. And so we would do it that way. Then he gave an outdoor speech in a stadium. And this was the weirdest weather situation I've ever been in. At one point, it was 20 degrees in a blizzard, and we could hardly see him. And minutes later, it was 60 degrees and sunny. And it went back and forth like that for 2 hours. And this guy, I don't know how he did it, but the Pope, who was like 80 years old at the time, gave a 2-hour speech through the same thing. And when it was raining out or snowing out, there were guys that came over with umbrellas, huge umbrellas that would cover him up. But even so, he didn't put on any coat or anything. He was dressed lightly, and he kept speaking, and I kept thinking, oh, please end this. We were frozen, absolutely frozen.
So I have a kind of it might be kind of personal, and have there been, like, how do you separate your own emotions from, because you've been in some, horrendous situations and have been in situations that are, I would imagine, pretty tough. Are you always able to take the photograph, or do sometimes it's just too much? So how do you separate all of that?
There's been a few times where I couldn't do it. One time is when I was on my own time in Northern Ireland, and I got to know a guy that where he lived in a housing situation which was mixed before the trouble started, and then the Catholics moved out, and when they moved out, they torched the place, so the whole place burnt down. Oh, it didn't all burn down, but it was pretty well gutted, and then they were rebuilding it, and when the Protestants moved out, they torched it, and it became an entirely Catholic compound after that. But anyway, he was taking me through the place, and we were walking around, and then we heard a noise, and we didn't know what it was, so we walked over to investigate, and there was a high tension wire that had dropped to the ground, and there was a little boy who was maybe 11 or 12 years old that had been playing there, and he was electrocuted. And his father and a couple of other guys came over and pulled him off, but it was too late. And his father picked him up and was carrying him in his arms right towards me and right past me. And I just felt like I couldn't this was such a private moment. I couldn't take that picture.
You were there, though, in that case, from what you just said, as a private citizen. Is it different emotions if you were covering?
I wasn't, even when you're a private citizen, you always have your camera with you. And I would do a lot of my work when I wasn't technically on duty. And that's just the way the Tribune worked, is that if you did any pictures on your own and they wanted to use them, then you got time off. It wasn't, I didn't get extra pay for it, and I didn't really want it. I much more appreciated my time off than extra pay.
Do you retain the copyrights to those personal pictures, like the Tribune then takes them, so to speak?
Probably not. No, anything that well, I mean, yeah, a lot of them. It's a weird situation,
Yeah.
and I can't tell you who owns what. I know for sure they own most of what I've taken.
We have about 5 minutes left, but some of the things I wanted to say is how COVID has impacted you over this past year. And I think you actually did some traveling. But tell us a little bit how COVID, impacted you personally, professionally.
Yeah. And also mention your books too.
I was, thank you. I was very fortunate because my girlfriend lives in Indiana and I live in Michigan, 15 minutes away. And so we'd spend time either at her house or my house, or take time off and be alone. And we were working on a genealogy book on my father's side. We'd already done, my sister and I had already done our mother's side before that. And Diane is a wonderful designer. So I pulled her out of retirement to design the book. And she did an incredible job. So anyway, and she's a gardener. She has the most fantastic garden I've ever seen. And so that kept her busy during the summer. And the book kept me busy all the time. And so we're very happy with it. There were our favorite restaurant, Cafe Gulistan, remained open the whole time, outdoors. And they had really good weather last year, so we could eat out, we could dine out. There are a couple of other places that were open. We did take one trip. I'd always wanted to go back to Mackinac Island, and so we thought, okay, let's go to Mackinac Island. We'll be outside all the time, and so we did that in June, and that worked out really well.
Anything else you're looking forward to doing now that the pandemic is sort of getting behind us?
Oh, well, we're double vaxxed. So as soon as that happened in March, we took a trip down to Florida. We went through DC, which is where my daughter is, and then went down the East Coast to Florida and then back. So we had quite a long trip then. And then we just came back from a trip out east again to DC, but then to Boston, to Vermont, right at the peak colors. This is around in early October. I've never seen colors like this. This was unbelievable. And the thing about Vermont, and then we went into Canada after that, and Quebec, was that all their colors happen at once. Whereas here in the Midwest, you get some trees are in color and then others are coming, and then the trees in color drop their leaves. And, so you don't get this powerful grouping of colors like we saw out there.
So Chuck, there are two books that you did also based on the Sidewalk columns as well, correct? Or
Yeah. So Northwestern did our first book, and we wanted to do another book because we had this an exhibit through the city of Chicago that was coming up. This was in January. It's coming up the following November, and we thought it'd be great to have a second book out by then. And Northwestern would have done it, but it takes publishers a year and a half, 2 years, 3 years to actually get a book out. And so we turned ourselves into a publishing company and put it together. Same people that did the Northwestern book did our book.
So I'm going to say, if you and Rick go out on another adventure for a Sidewalk, I want to tag along, please. I've always wanted to come along on those.
I wish that was going to happen, but I think those days are gone.
Well,
Rick's still doing the Sidewalks, but now he's doing it with whatever photographer happens to be around.
Well, we'd like to thank you for coming on Art in the Air. That's Chuck Osgood, world traveler, former photographer for the Chicago Tribune. And as you've heard, done much specialized in theater, performance, events, and everything. And been around for a while doing lots of things, especially the Sidewalk books. So tell us real quickly how they can find you, your website, and Chuck.
I don't know. Just Google Charles Osgood and the website comes up.
Oh.
Charles Osgood, photographer.
Well, the other one you can find is sidewalkbookcompany.com. That's sidewalkbookcompany.com. Chuck, thank you so much for coming on Art on the Air.
My pleasure, and thank you.
Thank you, Chuck.
You've been listening to Art in the Air, and we'd like to thank our guests this week on WVLP 103.1 FM and Lakeshore Public Radio 89.1 FM, our weekly program covering arts and arts events throughout Northwest Indiana and beyond. Art in the Air is heard every Friday at 11 a.m. and rebroadcast Monday at 5 p.m. on WVLP. Art in the Air streams live at WVLP.org and is rebroadcast on Monday at 5 p.m. Plus is also heard on Lakeshore Public Radio, 89.1 FM every Sunday at 7 p.m., also streaming live at lakeshorepublicradio.org and is available on Lakeshore Public Radio's website as a podcast. Our spotlight interviews are also heard Wednesdays on Lakeshore Public Radio. Thanks again to Greg Kovach, WVLP station manager, and Tom Maloney, vice president of radio operations for Lakeshore Public Radio. Our theme music is by Billy Foster with a vocal by Renee Foster. Art in the Air is supported by an Indiana Arts Commission Arts Project grant and the National Endowment for the Arts. Underwriters for Art in the Air, Walt Breidinger of Paragon Investments and Marilyn Van, Arts Patron. Art in the Air is always looking for financial support. We'd like to thank our current supporters. If you're looking to support Art in the Air, Esther and I especially would invite you to become an underwriter of this program in particular. We have information on our website at breck.com/AOTA. You can find out support information there. So don't just be an Art on the Air listener. Become a supporter or underwriter in whatever amount you're able to do so we continue to bring you great content and this great local programming. And like I say every week, don't give till it hurts. Give till it feels good. And you'll feel so good about supporting Art on the Air. Information about Art on the Air is available at our website, breck.com/AOTA. That's Breck, BRECH.com/AOTA. That includes a complete show archive, spotlight interviews, plus our show is available on multiple podcast platforms, including NPR One. Please like us on Facebook, Art on the Air, WVLP, for information about upcoming shows and interviews. If you're interested in being a guest or sending us information about your arts-related event or exhibit, please email us at aota@breck.com. That's aota@breck, BRECH.com, or contact us through our Facebook page. Your hosts were Larry Breckner and Esther Golden, and we invite you back next week for another episode of Art on the Air.
Aloha, everyone. Have a splendid week.
Express yourself through art and show the world your heart. Express yourself through art and show the world your heart. You're in the know with Esther and Larry. Art on the Air today. Stay in the know with Larry and Esther. Art on the Air our way. Express yourself through art and show the world your heart. Express yourself through art and show the world your heart. Express yourself through art and show the world your heart. Express yourself through art and show the world.